Hello, everybody.
Hi, Becky.
Give everybody till exactly 7 o'clock and then get started since we have 4 of us. You guys can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. My computer's on its last legs, so I'm trying to make sure it doesn't go haywire before I can replace it and upgrade my technology.
I got a new computer last summer.
Do things work better now?
Oh, it's much better. The other one was from 2018. So 5 years for a computer these days.
I actually should look how old this is. It's about the same.
Yeah.
Definitely pre-COVID by a lot.
My last laptop was over 10 years old when I replaced it, which felt like such a victory, but I think that'll never happen again.
Okay,
I hope it lasts through the meeting at least.
Let Councillor Greenberg join. I'm just checking the attendees real quick. So it looks like we are, that we've got all the councillors here who have joined so far. Okay, ready, Miss Delaney, to start recording?
Hold on just one moment.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, April 17th at 7 o'clock, and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. I'm joined at the start of the meeting by Councillor Downs, Vice Chair of the committee, as well as Councillors Lucas, Bixby, Block, Malachy, and Greenberg. We have 2 items on our agenda tonight. The first is item 40-24 to allow play on minor streets. And we have also been joined by Councillors Lipoff and Wright. So this first item, 40-24, Councillors Downs, Grossman, Bixby, Wright, Humphrey, Mickley, and Lipoff requesting to amend Chapter 26-19 of the Newton Ordinances to allow play and other community activities on minor streets, as is the practice currently. We took this up on March 6th, discussed some preliminary ideas of what the committee hope to see us do with this ordinance, and then Councillor Downs took our feedback to the law department and has proposed some edits. So why don't I turn it over to you, Councillor Downs?
Yeah, I think the language is pretty self-explanatory. It just allows playing ball, but not flying kites, throwing missiles in the streets. And we clarified that throwing things off of overpasses was something that, we wanted to continue to prohibit, but we weren't going to go after people throwing or dropping rocks off of bridges into water and things like that. So that's the proposed clean language is attached to the agenda. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and I think it covers our discussion.
Just a sort of as a point of curiosity, not that I have strong feelings about it, but is the idea that flying a kite over and upon an overpass, someone risks falling off the overpass, or is there
probably a bad idea? But I guess we didn't think about flying kites off of overpasses. I think it's more just our overpasses don't tend to have overhead wires, but they do tend to have fencing. So it'd be hard.
Maybe you'd get it caught in the fencing.
You might allow it, but it probably doesn't matter that much.
Do we have comments or questions? Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, I guess, for Councillor Downs. What is the difference between an overpass and a bridge?
So an overpass goes over a highway or a street, and a bridge tends to be over water. Although we do have decorative bridges in places like Farlow Park that don't really go over water.
So Walnut Street over the Pike, that is
Overpass.
that's considered an overpass.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
Hyde Street over the Green Line is an overpass.
it's an overpass because it goes over the train tracks.
Right.
But what's behind you or in your Zoom background, that is clearly
A bridge.
bridge. Just.
Yeah.
wanted to-
Unlike, we don't have that many kids throwing things off of Echo Bridge, but further upriver is Cook's Bridge, which goes between Newton and Needham also. I gotta tell you, the kids like to throw stuff off of bridges and watch it go downstream.
Seems
And
fair.
I don't think we should make that illegal.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, all right, so no person shall fly a kite, throw a stone or snowball or any other missile in any street or upon or from any overpass. Okay, so. All right, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Greenberg, then Counselor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Should we include a drone if we're including flying a kite? Should drones be included?
We have drone ordinances. We have a separate item in the ordinances about drones.
And does the ordinance include using them in a street? Or an overpass?
It did. Not sure the current I'm not sure about the current. I think it's allowed over streets. And the reason why I think it is because we've had drone footage of school arrival and dismissal on Albemarle.
Yeah.
That informed us of some of the crossing and driving behaviors that led to the Albemarle traffic calming project. So it can be quite useful to have a
Okay.
drone. I think the problem with kites is strings.
I see. And then, excuse me, my other question with snowballs. If kids are in a cul-de-sac having a snowball fight in the street, that won't be allowed anymore?
Do you want to amend that?
I mean, I don't know, it just seems so,
It does seem like
it's ridiculous if kids have a snowball fight in the street. I mean, they're not gonna do it on Com Ave or Route 9, but on the-
not
on the
in heavy
side
traffic.
So I don't know, that's the only thing that would be happy to get rid of the snowball fights.
So
snowball,
Counselor
so-
Greenberg, let's look at this quickly. I agree with you on that.
We could take out the snowball language.
I was gonna say, what if we were just
Stone or,
silent on
any
snowballs?
other hard, any other hard missile, because ball might be considered a missile also.
I'd be
Uh,
good with that.
You'd be good with just removing
Snowballs,
the term snowball?
yeah.
Can I, sorry, I'm not sure what order you want to go.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just go
Yeah.
Counselor Wright first, and then I'll come right to you, Counselor Bixby.
Um,
Counselor Wright.
so my husband does a lot of kite flying and stuff. Kite flying shouldn't be done in the street because you're always looking up. You're never looking down at the road. So you wouldn't see if a car was coming or anything like that. And you also need a lot of space and, more like a park setting than a street setting. And throwing sticks off of bridges, I used to do it with my kids. It's in Winnie the Pooh, Pooh sticks. It's called that.
Very good.
Counselor Bixby.
Thanks, Chair. My apologies for I'm still getting used to the flow of these things. I just wanted to weigh in on the snowball thing. I mean, I think the challenge with the snowball language is the difference between, kids having a snowball fight and snowballs being launched at vehicles or, cyclists or passersby. And I don't know what the nuances of that would be, but I think that's the challenge is if we remove it completely, do we remove the prohibition of throwing them at vehicles in some way?
I guess my gut reaction to that is, I mean, it's a little arbitrary that we're talking about throwing a stone or a snowball or any other missile. I mean, no person should throw, a book from an overpass. I mean, there's so many different objects we could list. The missile language, I actually don't know what the definition of missile is. In this context, it seems to me an object that could cause some sort of harm or damage. It just seems a little silly to me to call out, snowball. That said, I also wouldn't have a problem. It makes it more complicated, but I wouldn't have a problem saying it's not okay to throw a snowball from an overpass, but it is okay to throw a snowball in a street. I do think a snowball fight in a cul-de-sac or on a quiet street on a snowy day should be legal.
I actually don't think we're going to have a huge problem with throwing snowballs off of overpasses because they now have fencing. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Councilor Greenberg, would you like to make a motion to strike the word snowball?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to remove the language about snowballs from this. If that were successful, I think the language we would be left with is no person shall fly a kite, throw a stone, or any other missile in any street or upon or from any overpass. Does that sound right to you, Councilor Greenberg? Just want to make sure I'm
Yeah, I think that's
capturing
much
your
better.
intent.
Yeah, I think that's much better. Thank you.
Excuse me, Council Grossman,
Yes.
did you want to add the word hard missile? Council Downs?
I'm just going to look up the definition of the word missile.
I think we can leave it alone.
Okay, so missile. This is just the first thing that comes up on Google definitions from Oxford Languages and others. An object which is forcibly propelled at a target, either by hand or from a mechanical weapon. When the example is, quote, one of the players was hit on the head by a missile thrown by a spectator, end quote. That seems to cover it to me. Do we have comments on Councilor Greenberg's motion? Okay, I don't see any.
Yeah.
So let's take a vote. All those in favor of Councilor Greenberg's motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we now have an amended ordinance before us. Do we have any further discussion on this? Okay, would somebody like to make a motion on the proposed ordinance as amended?
I'll move approval.
Councilor Greenberg has moved approval. Any discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, Councilor Bixby, did you want to say something?
Sorry, well, I did still have a question, I guess, looking through the ordinances and stuff about, and I wasn't quite sure where we were on this, but if we end up in a situation where people are playing ball on a busier street or something that ends up, what are how does this, I'd be interested to know a little bit, and maybe we need to kind of see it in action and see if these situations even come up, but what are the steps that then would be taken for folks if we are removing playing ball? Do you understand? I'm not sure folks understand what I'm trying to ask, but if we if somebody suddenly decides, okay, they learn that this has now been changed and decides to play ball and Middle Commonwealth Avenue, or, you know, some of the scenarios that we discussed last time, are they then, how are they approached or, you know, dealt with in that situation? Again, we might, hopefully this will never come up, but if it does, Councilor Downs, looks like you had some
I
thoughts
have
on this, but
thoughts. So
Go for
it's
it,
kind of
Councilor Downs.
like, it's kind of like, we don't outlaw lying down in the street. We do have, there are some rules about obstructing traffic and all of that, but we don't outlaw things that are clearly unsafe that people don't do, even though they're stupid. In part because it has some there. And, you know, I just don't think we need to go down that particular rabbit hole. Unfortunately.
I had the same
Okay.
thoughts as you, though my example was going to be we don't outlaw dancing in the middle of the street. I mean, to me, if somebody was having a, you know, raucous game of football or something in the middle of Waverly Avenue, a neighbor might call the police if they didn't have the opportunity to approach the individuals directly, or parents or whatever. I imagine police would respond and kindly encourage them to move their game off the street. I don't know. I agree with Councilor Downs that I think being silent is sufficient. And should it present a problem where all of a sudden we're getting lots of complaints that games of spike ball are breaking out in streets, we can revisit it.
Great. No,
Does
again,
that
I'm very in favor
make
of this. I think both of your examples are very helpful for me to think it through. I just want to make sure that, you know, since we are changing this scenario, that we have thought that through, but you both have in a way that helps me. So thank you.
Sure. Councilor Block.
Thank you, Chair Grossman. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
I think our discussion makes me feel even more that I really wonder why we're trying to parse this. And if we're concerned about uneven enforcement of our laws, that we ought to repeal some ordinance. We think it might be misinterpreted. I understand there's a motion on the floor and I'll be abstaining. I just don't think this is a smart use of our time and a smart approach to something which is by and large self-enforcing for all the reasons people have said. And if there are true safety hazards that are taking place, the police have lots of authority in order to enforce it. So that's just my thought on this. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? I apologize for muddying the waters a bit. We were mid-vote when I saw Councilor Bixby's hand. I always want to let people say what they want to say, but I didn't mean to confuse things. Let's, we had the motion to approve from Councilor Greenberg. Let's just take that vote another time to make sure we get a clear record here. All those in favor of Councilor Greenberg's motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
One. Okay. So, and Councilor Bixby, are you, I saw a thumbs up. Was that an aye or an abstention?
Oh, I was an aye. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, how many are we right now? Do we have all 8?
There's all 8, so the vote is 701, Council Block abstaining.
Okay, excellent. And I see we've been joined by Councilor Kelly. Welcome, Councilor Kelly. So that item is all set for this evening, and we are going to move on to our next and final item, which is 201-24, requesting a policy discussion review and possible action related to parking on street and in municipal lots. This was docketed by me, Councilor Downs, and President Laredo, requesting a discussion and review of parking policy related to on-street parking and parking in municipal lots, including possible action on related ordinances and permit programs. Let me set the stage on this one a little bit, and Councilor Downs chime in if I'm misstating anything, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for your thoughts next. So we docketed this item, and you all will probably remember that there was an additional item that Councilor Downs and others had docketed a few weeks prior, essentially to start the process of wrestling with our parking policy, particularly with respect to on-street parking. And of course, this issue has been front and center, not only our last few terms, but also because we have a measure that will be before the voters on the ballot next November, which will speak to our current overnight winter parking ban. Councilor Downs, President Laredo, and I met a few times with the law department to talk about what, if anything, the council might consider with respect to parking policy this term, and how the outcome of any of those discussions could impact what occurs with the ballot measure. So let me give you an example. If we all decided as a committee to make a recommendation to the council, and the council were to vote to repeal the overnight parking ban entirely, for example, that would mean that the ballot measure before the voters next November would be essentially rendered irrelevant, and that ballot question would end up being removed because there would be no reason to have a vote. So part of our discussion with the law department was to say, if the council wanted to make different degrees of changes to the parking ordinance, what is the threshold that would affect whether or not the ballot question goes forward or not? And the law department wrestled with it, I think is still wrestling with it a bit, and did not really feel in a position to clearly opine or participate directly with us at this moment on that question. But the kind of broad outline that they did give us was to say, it's clear that if there was an outright repeal of the ban, it would make the question irrelevant. Anything short of that, there'd have to be a really careful legal analysis comparing whatever actions the council were to take with the intent and the wording of the ballot question and the petition that gave rise to it. So because of that, and in consultation with the law department, we decided to docket this additional item, which is a little bit more removed from the question of the parking ban itself. And really the intent of it was to give the council a mechanism to discuss what our quote unquote ideal parking policy is in general. And then if it is the will of the council to put forth some other type of parking ordinance, parking program, what have you, we would at that point wrestle with what that would mean vis-a-vis the ballot measure. So my intent tonight is to start taking the temperature of the committee about how you would like to go about tackling this issue. And I'll give you a couple examples of ideas that have been put out there. One idea is for us just to have a discussion in committee, which I imagine would go on for a whole bunch of meetings, about parking policy, folks' ideas about parking policy, what you think makes sense, what you think doesn't make sense, brainstorming ideas, bringing in different folks from the administration to get their feedback and try to see if this committee can arrive at some kind of a consensus and recommendation, which could be no change to what we have now, or could be significant change. Another possibility would be that I can appoint a subcommittee of members of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee to discuss this in separate meetings. As you can imagine, it's probably a lengthy topic and something that would take a bunch of hours of diving in. And folks could have, we could appoint a subcommittee whose sole job is taking up this issue so that it's not before us on a ongoing basis as a full committee. Another idea that has been floated is to have more of a working group type of approach, which would be more of a group that meets offline, not necessarily in. I actually don't know exactly what the rules are, but I think if it were a working group, we wouldn't be talking about public Zoom recorded meetings. It would be more offline type work behind the scenes that then would get presented in more of a public forum. And of course, in all of these, Councillor Downs and I have been talking quite a lot about how we bring in public comment and feedback and collaboration with members of the public. So that's obviously front and center and very important to us. So Councillor Downs, let me turn it to you to add your thoughts and see where that takes us for the discussion tonight.
I think you pretty much covered it, Chair. I had been going back over our past discussions because it seems to me we're having the same discussion over and over again, and we also have some new members. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we have several times brought up the overnight parking ban and piloting different changes to that. And we've had that discussion 3 times, and 3 times this committee and the full council has said, we are not interested in touching the overnight parking ban outside of perhaps tweaking the dates. And even at that point, we weren't tweaking the dates in the end. So I did summarize, and I don't know if you want to share the memo I put together, but I summarized what the 2 or 3 arguments are on either side, as well as what the what city officials have told us, what the administration has told us they are able to do and unable to do. And then I gave links to the various reports, and I suggest we all have a look at this. So I think tonight we're really talking about how do we want to move forward, because we need to also look backward and see what we've already done before we get into the substance of this. Does that sound right?
I think so. Do you want to put up, do you have that handy to share your screen at the moment or no?
I have it, but I can't share my screen from this.
No problem. Why don't you just
I'd have to log in separately.
So why don't you just orally go over the outlines, because Councillor Downs and I were just going back and forth on this as late as an hour or 2 before this meeting. So just to put some ideas before you all and get the discussion going.
Let me send this to the clerk so that she can put it up, and I'll start reading it as soon as I've done that. Because you sent me a redlined version, and I don't want to send that out. I will send out the simple or the no markup one. And
while you're doing that, Councillor Lucas has his hand up. So why don't I recognize you, Councillor Lucas? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Because you brought it up and I need an answer to this question. The differences between a working group and a subcommittee. Could you explain them if you know, please?
I don't fully know. I suspect that the main difference would be that a subcommittee would be having noticed public recorded meetings, and it would be composed of members of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. If we were to appoint a working group, and this is my gut reaction based on a number of working groups that I've participated in and observances of how working groups have operated in other examples, I think that would not necessarily need to be limited to the Public Safety and Transportation Committee in terms of makeup. And there's some difference of opinion about whether this should really be within the confines of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. I also think that would imply meetings that are happening offline, not recorded, and not most likely open to the public.
And with working groups, it can only be members of the city council?
I don't think so. I've definitely participated in working groups where there have been various members of the public, members of the administration. That said, one thing I will tell you, based on my participation in the Ward Underwood working group, is that lately it's been a little unclear when one forms a working group, whose working group it is, what authority they have, and who's in charge. On the Ward Underwood working group, it was incredibly unclear whose working group it was and who the working group was reporting to and what the rules of engagement were of the working group. So I think that is much murkier. And I don't know, for example, if we were to form a working group and we asked a few members of the administration to participate, I have no idea if the mayor would willingly offer the time, work, and attention of members of the administration or not for such an effort.
I agree with that assessment. Okay, so again, I guess this through you to Councillor Bixby, the community dialogue, is it working group or community dialogue subcommittee?
We've gone, I think we've used both. I think we are a working group, but since we were official order of the council created working group, maybe our rules of engagement are a little different. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
But we are, I mean, we were referred to as a working group in our creation, and we do.
There was
we
a
are
discussion
on Zoom
about
and
whether
such, but
there was a discussion when it was formed with Councillor Oliver and President Laredo about how to do operations, and they decided better to put them all in the public and record them and have them open to the public rather than not, just because it was a committee about transparency in part.
So let me just get back to the substance. I think if you're okay with it, Chair, we should have either a working group or a subcommittee of the PS&T to come up with recommendations about parking lots, on-street parking, you name it, and just come up with ideas. I think that's the right way to go about this. And again, that subcommittee, working group, I don't know. I'll let someone else chime in on that and offer their opinion on which one is best. But I think we definitely do need to move on this. And I wouldn't, if we do create one, I volunteer to be on it. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Downs, are you ready?
I am. Ms. Delaney, do you have the
Yes,
memo?
I'm going to share my screen now. Just a moment.
Super.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Block, I do see your hand. I'll come to you right after we go over this.
And I would have loved to have gotten this to people ahead of time, but we are all dealing with complicated schedules.
Can you see the screen?
No,
Not yet.
not yet.
There,
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
there we go.
Excellent.
Oh, I think that's the red line version still.
That is the red line version still, but it's good enough. We'll get a clean copy up. I sent over the other one. Ms. Delaney, you could just put in under review. You see that fourth from the right-hand side in Word? If you go under review, you can select.
Oh, review.
And Yeah, and you see over where the memo says all markup, change that to no markup. It's yeah, right there. Perfect.
Thank you.
There we are. So basically I looked at what the
Excuse
various
me.
arguments. Yes,
Can you make it a little bit bigger, please?
you can zoom in on your screen as
Oh,
well,
that's true. I can do that.
which is how I would do it. So I put together some of the arguments pro and con from the various meetings, the 3 meetings we had, including what I recalled from the city council the whole council meetings. Those who favor the overnight parking ban talk about, not dedicating public space to private car storage. They link this to climate action and reducing private vehicle emissions and to reducing traffic. It also.
So you may just want to scroll down to the middle
And-
to the
yes, and-
enumerate. Yeah, there you go.
Perfect. A second argument is that the overnight parking ban limits the number of cars parked in the public way, and this has advantages. If you have nearby multifamily properties with paid on-site parking, or that have limited on-site parking, or it leaves room for fire trucks, street sweepers, that's a tongue twister, snow plows. And then there are wards where there are college students bringing cars and they want to have limits on that. This does that. Or border towns where the nearby city or town has an overnight ban or difficult on-street parking, and they want to limit the number of guest vehicles from nearby towns. And then there are parts of Ward 8 where long-term storage of cars the rest of the year becomes an issue for people who want to use the streets for other things than car storage. It's opposed, however, because it's seen as unfair for those who bought or rented without adequate driveway space. And the way we have it now, you can park in some of our public lots in the winter during the ban, but when snow is predicted, you have to find another spot to put your car. In some wards, we're seeing front yard parking, which is illegal, but if you haven't paved the spot, it's not enforced. And it only applies for a limited amount of time. And we've had 2 years with very little snow. In a declared snow emergency, we have an ordinance, which, as I put down below, what we learned from city officials is that fire and DPW do not tell us they do not have an issue with lifting the ban, that they can use the snow emergency ordinances to clear vehicles before major storms. The police are really not able to enforce a permit program because in the winter they would have to scrape off windshields or clear license plates to do so. They getting in and out of vehicles at night when it's just the patrol officers is an undue burden for them. The administration said very clearly that any parking program needs to be easy to implement and enforce, but they would be okay with a trial program in a zone of the city. And then I have the various reports so you can go back and read the materials yourself and see if you agree or disagree. You can, I think at this, unless my colleagues need it up, we can leave it there and then just talk about the structure of how we move forward.
I think we can probably take it down. Thank you very much. I think that helps us set the stage, and we'll have a clean memo and the reports that Councillor Downs mentioned attached in our report for this meeting. Councillor Block, you had your hand up next, and then Councillor Greenberg.
Sorry for that delay in unmuting. Thank you, Chair Grossman. I was on the land use committee, am on the land use committee when it considered the petition from the owners of 113 Edinburgh, which we all ended up voting on second call. They don't have off-street parking, and they were petitioning to allow for a vehicle to be parked in their front yard. And we decided not to approve that petition, but that example made me feel that we do have a problem as a city. There are probably quite a few residents who don't have off-street parking, and this requirement does make it very difficult for them. There is the option of parking in city lots, and I think that perhaps not everybody realizes that. Some people who don't like the seasonal parking ban may not realize that the city does have an option if people live close enough to a municipal lot. And application to use those lots is pretty much pro forma. But it does seem to me that trying to figure out if there's an on-street parking permit system that we could develop. We're not the first town to have this problem. In fact, it's actually a fairly common problem in the metropolitan area, especially denser cities and older cities. They struggle with this. And so it's not a surprise that we're struggling with it. I think we can learn from what other towns have done. I've started to call some of them myself. The one so far that is kind of I guess the most direct and straightforward application is Norwood. They do have a seasonal parking ban, and they have a permit system which the police traffic department monitors, and anyone can apply, and they basically have a single criterion for determining whether to issue the permit or not, and that is whether the property has off-street parking available or not. And if it doesn't, it gets one permit, and if it does, the permit is denied. It's just very straightforward. Now, people may not want to do that here, but I just mentioned this as an illustration of the variety of responses that we could develop in Newton, and I think we should research it and try and come to some consensus about what we should do about it. So, and I second Councillor Lucas's interest in this, and I would also volunteer to serve on a committee or a working group, whatever we call it. Thanks. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Greenberg.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to agree with Councilor Lucas that a subcommittee or a working group would be a good idea to deal with this complex issue in a more intense way, more than we could as a committee. Thank you.
So let me throw out a little bit of a counter opinion, because I've been thinking about this a lot myself too. I think in general, the content before us as a committee over the course of the term, at least so far, is shaping up to be on the lighter side. And I also personally am always thinking about limiting extra meeting time for people. And I'm just not a fan of adding lots of meetings to people's calendars. So my own gut reaction at the moment is that I would rather wrestle with it as a committee and deal with the issues here as a group of 8 and what other counselors want to join us. Mostly because I think that would be a meaningful, productive use of our time. I think it's a natural forum for inviting organized public comment. One of the major downsides of that is because we, of course, meet on the same night and at the same time as other committees. That makes it harder for other counselors who want to weigh in to come weigh in. That said, I have no idea when a subcommittee would meet and how available that subcommittee would be to anybody. We always have conflicts. So at the moment, my own personal preference would be to dig into this and do it as a full committee. I guess I also wrestle with the idea of, with something that can be such a hot topic as this, if those intricate debates, pro and con of different ideas, are happening in either a working group or a subcommittee, I suspect that those arguments would end up being rehashed and repeated when the full committee has to deliberate, and then rehashed and repeated again when the whole council has to deliberate. So I'm wrestling with that a little bit. That said, I think those of you who have worked with me for a while know I have a strong view of respecting the will of the committee on these kinds of decisions, and really do want to know what people think and what your feedback is as we're coming to a determination. Councillor Downs, let me come back to you, then Councillor Bixby.
Let's hear from Councillor Bixby first, and then I'll go.
Okay, Councillor Bixby.
Thank you. I can see pros and cons of each format. I mean, I think the work that Councillor Block, said he's already done, some of that, I think when there is a smaller group is perhaps a little more natural. So I think if we do end up doing it as a full committee, perhaps certain people who are more interested can step up and do some of that, or, we can bring it into committee, like you said, Chair. But, I do think that is one advantage of the smaller group. The advantage of doing it as a full committee to me is that we have representation from each ward here. And I think that we each know our neighborhoods, and the nuances of what people are facing in our, in the wards that we originate from or represent, perhaps in a way that could be beneficial to a conversation like this, because I do think each, various sections of the city just have different experiences with this, like your memo outlined. So I'd be a little concerned if we had a smaller group that didn't have representation from each ward, that we'd be missing perhaps some of those pieces and nuances. So not sure that's helpful in terms of making a final decision, but I think there's some advantages to each.
One reaction that I'm just having to what you just said, Councillor Bixby, and it sort of triggered something I thought about before. If we were to form a working group, one of the things I struggle with is figuring out who is on it if we are expanding it beyond elected representatives. We have some really vocal residents who have strong feelings on I'll say both sides, although I suspect it's many sides of the issue. And while it's tempting to invite some of those most prominent voices in, I think we also have to be careful and cognizant of the fact that each of us here was elected to represent a certain constituency, or however you want to think about it. So I would we'd have to think really carefully about making sure we're really representing people equitably, for lack of a better word. Councillor Downs.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a long time. And those of you who are new to the council probably don't know that we received over 500 emails, pro and con, when we first took this up last term. And as I said, that's why I summarized the arguments, but we've definitely heard from a lot of the neighborhoods. Now, some things are neighborhood specific. Nantum definitely has issues with clearance for safety. and for street cleaning and for any number of other reasons. Ward 8, as I mentioned, has other issues, particularly in Oak Hill Park. Village centers is another area I can think of that has issues. And we had proposed permit programs in neighborhoods like the one on Edinburgh Street, where people needed a place to put a car because they didn't have on off-street parking, and got very heavy pushback from the police department. I don't think a permit program is something that our department is ready to enforce, no matter what the criteria are. And we've also done some research. We do know that Brookline bans overnight parking all year round. That's where Newton was. We know that Boston does not. And we could certainly look into Waltham. I've heard both about Waltham, both that it does not allow overnight winter parking and that it does, and it's no problem. And I'm not sure what the truth is, but that's something we could certainly make a few phone calls about and find out about. So a lot of that research is done. The real question is how to be, I think Chair Grossman put it well, how to be equitable, how to be fair, how to be efficient about it, and how to work with the administration to the extent that we can. The mayor's position is that she doesn't think we should have an overnight parking ban, and is not willing to give us oodles of staff time to research individual streets and solutions. That's why I said it has to be easy to implement and easy to enforce. Oodles of staff time being the thing she does not have. I could go either way: subcommittee, working group, PS&T meeting. I think we need to invite and make time for the counselors on the other P committees, and that's the problem with working within PS&T. So we might want to take PS&T to those Thursday nights that are open when we're doing the parking issues, so that our colleagues can join us. Thank you, Councilor Kelly, for joining us today. Councilor Kelly was one of the co-docketers of one of the first iterations of let's see what we can do about the overnight parking ban so it's not so onerous. The working group that I'm part of is mostly, it has some citizen representatives, but it's mostly city staff and a few electives, and it does not have recorded minutes and is not recorded, and a lot gets done, and it's run pretty efficiently by a staff member, somebody in the administration. So, if it was run by us, we'd have to make sure we have staff backup to just, organize we are meeting at X, here's the Zoom link, and make sure that everyone got an invitation that needed to get there. And that's that we try to find a time when our colleagues could join us.
That's interesting. I wonder if it would be possible, if we could have kind of a preliminary discussion or two where, as a full committee, where we're brainstorming all kinds of ideas. I mean, you've already compiled a preliminary list of different creative solutions people have come out with, and see if as a committee certain ones resonate, and then diving into pros and cons of any one of those to take that meeting to a night that's not Wednesday, or a time that's not 7 p.m. So that others have the ability to weigh in there. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you. So I've been listening to everyone speak. I want to give a shout out to Councilor Block for doing some research on his own. about the town of Norwood. Very good to know they have a very, dare I say, black and white solution to their overnight parking. I am inclined, going back to my prior comments, I am inclined to say that we should have a working group, because that would potentially allow other people not on PS&T to join. And perhaps the working group, again, I'm just thinking out loud, perhaps the working group could report back periodically to PS&T with some sort of written report every month, every other month, whatever it is, to provide an update. Hey, this is what we found out. This is what we might recommend. We're throwing out some ideas, some possibilities that we could do this, we could do that, and just, you know, potentially shop that around the council and just look for feedback on the progress of the working group. The subcommittee, you know, that will be, I think, tougher, because it only limits the 8 of us here would be on it, if I understand the rules correctly. It would only be the members of the of PS&T, and I want more viewpoints than just the 8 of us. So I'm inclined to support a working group.
Let me ask you a question. When you say more viewpoints than the 8 of us, do you mean more viewpoints from other counselors, or you mean more viewpoints from members of the public?
Other counselors, and of course, you know, we get emails all the time. So if everyone wants to offer up an opinion who's not on the council of possible solutions, or maybe things that we're doing wrong, they can always send us an email. So, I mean, or give us a call. But I'm inclined to go with working group.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you. So after your comments, Chair and Councilor Bixby, I've decided that I think it's probably better that we have this discussion in committee instead of a working group. I think having representation from each of the wards is important, and that would be missed if we had a subcommittee or a working group, whatever that would be. And I think that this would be a good use of our time as a committee. So I've changed my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Block, then Lipoff.
I just have to say this for the record. There are 9 towns that have an all-year ban, 15 that have seasonal bans, including Newton. 2, Lawrence and Haverhill, have an alternate side of the street parking approach. 15 towns try and manage this through residency parking permit systems, and 11 have no seasonal ban at all. So when I said there are a lot of different solutions to this, all of these towns in the metropolitan area are wrestling with this in one form or another. So it should be no surprise that we are too. Back to the point about the committee and working groups and subcommittees. I am new to this, so I guess I'm still developing maybe a philosophy about all this, but we've got committees. We all rely on committees that we're not on to vet issues, to talk about them, and to bring them to the city council when they feel they're ready to be brought to the city council. I don't really see why this should be any different. And Chair Grossman, you're talking about the difficulty of figuring out who serves on it and should the public serve on it. I think that's exactly why those approaches aren't done very often. So keeping this in committee, I think, makes a lot of sense. I think we can still have those people who want to spend extra time on this, which I am willing to do. And if we're all willing to spend extra time on it, fine. We can divide up issues and do the research and learn about what the different options are, what the different pros and cons are to different approaches, and just have our own discussion. If we could come to a consensus, I think that would be a really good sign that the city council might as well. But who knows? The other 16 members might have other ideas, and we just have to kind of work it all through the way we do other difficult issues. So that's just how I'm thinking about this at this point. I think if this happens to be in our scope of work, we ought to do it the best way we can. And other city councilors that want to sit in on the meetings and participate, that's great. And if there are conflicts, well, there are always conflicts. So that's just my reaction at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Lipoff.
I agree with Councilors Block and Greenberg on this. If there's going to be any more talk, debate, consideration on overnight parking, it needs to be done in this committee with all wards represented, absolutely. I find this a little redundant. I mean, we've been talking about this forever. We can't come to any solution. We can keep trying. But I think that ultimately this is one of the few things that's going to go to the community at large for a vote. And I know that there are people that are quite scared of that on each side, but whatever comes out of that, I think then each street and each neighborhood that has a real reason to go the other way, whichever way it goes, has the opportunity to come to the traffic council, to us, and to plead their case, and we can deal with it then. A lot of these issues are micro issues to streets or neighborhoods that will be affected one way or the other. I'm happy to continue to talk about this. I don't think it needs to be in a subcommittee, but I think it's too big of an issue for us to come out with some magic fix here. And I, for one, feel that this is definitely a ballot question that deserves to go to the people. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a lot of feedback. I really appreciate it. I think that gives Councillor Downs and I some things to go back to President Laredo with, and my gut reaction right now is to keep it in committee. But I would like the opportunity to reflect on a little more, talk to Councillor Downs, and then we'll put it on another upcoming agenda to take it forward in one direction or the other that we've been discussing tonight. Councillor Wright.
I think I was torn which way to go, but I think keeping a committee would be good. But there's a lot of people who are interested, a lot of other councilors, is that I think we may need to go like on a Thursday night when we're discussing this. So other people who are interested can be there.
Yeah, I think those suggestions make sense. We probably need to think a little bit. I don't think we could always meet on a Thursday night, but we may be able to periodically find times, particularly at meaningful inflection points, if meaningful inflection points present themselves, to schedule a discussion at a different time that invites broader participation from the council.
Just not a traffic council Thursday.
Right. All right. I think if anybody has anything further, happy to hear it. And otherwise, I think we could probably take a motion to hold for now, do some reflecting, and come back to you the next time we put it on the agenda to figure out or share how we've decided to proceed. Does that make sense? Okay. Can I have a motion to hold, please?
Motion to hold.
Motion to hold by Councillor Wright. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we are adjourned at 8:03. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon.
Night on.